Greetings, 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 good people. Welcome to day 23. We are moving right along, y'all, with our 28-day Black History Month Ancestral Activation. And we're doing all of this for Black liberation. We're continuing this mission. We're continuing the journey that our ancestors started long ago to reclaim our liberation. And today, well, this week, we're working with community ancestors that, in their own way, in whichever capacity that they were meant to, did work that left for us a path towards restoration, a path towards healing and reclaiming what was lost throughout this 500-year journey that we've been on, this 500-year I'm gonna just call it a situation right now because the sister is tired. It's been a lot of things happening in the world, um, and we're at the latest iteration of it. And so today we are talking about and honoring. Now let me say it slowly. Nana Akua Opare and Nana Yao Opare Dinizulu the first. Here forward, I will refer to them as Nana Akua and Nana Dinizulu. And I'm pausing and I'm being intentional because as we have talked about, saying an ancestor's name is creates a spiritual vibration. There is a vibration in that. And I'm talking about just saying your ancestors' names. And because of what we're talking about today is ancestral connection, spiritual connection, reclaiming part of what's lost. And these two individuals did incredible work and left an incredible legacy for us. So I want to be respectful. Um, so I'm going to be, I'll clarify that as we go along in this. And so that's kind of the reason why I'm just really being intentional with my words. And so if that's your thing, of understanding what we're in and how to tap into ancestral wisdom with this series, the 28-day series that we're in, and all of the content that we have here on Beautiful Powerful Love, definitely like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when we go live. And who is we? We is I. I am Barbara Ohuninifa, and greetings, Power Dynamics for Live. And I am an author, a coach, and a speaker, and I work with Black women to help us recognize and remember that we are beautiful, we are powerful, and we literally are the embodiment of love. That is why a huge part of the reason why we are feared and why at the same time they come to us for help. They come to us for love. They come for us for guidance, to us for guidance, but then at the same time don't recognize the contributions that we make. And it's time for us to start to shift that because we can. One of the things that has really been highlighted for me throughout these few weeks of doing this ancestral activation is how powerful Black women are and can be, but have not been included in key places and at key times when we needed to be included. And that has limited or slowed down our path to liberation. That's a big learning for me coming out of this because, I'm on this journey with y'all. I'm creating and doing all of this real time. So I'm on this journey with y'all. Some of the people that we selected, even the people that I selected that I can say I selected, but really my ancestors gave me all of the people that we are working with because as we've gone through, like I didn't know who Nana Akua and Nana Dinizulu were before doing this work, before preparing this ancestral activation. So I'm learning and expanding right along with y'all. So I hope that it's been beneficial for you as we go through. But anyway, that is what we're doing today. And obviously, this is a day when I am off camera. As you can hear it in my voice, the sister is tired, but also we're doing every other day if I can. Sometimes it's 2 days in a row off camera, but this is definitely an off camera day. Um, on the Lord's Day on this Sunday. So we give thanks and thank y'all for being here. And for the hashtag replay, because that's important as well. Keep this algorithm going, making comments, sharing it, doing your thing. And we know I'm going live during Black History Month to tap into that energy. I talked about that earlier in the series. when we were going through our own personal lineages with sacred lineage. But going live and connecting and doing this work during Black History Month is creating an energy that will help us and propel us throughout the rest of the year. So although, again, I'm doing this live and it's Black History Month, this content, these resources, this wisdom, all the things are going to be here indefinitely, where, as long as the internet's here, and for us to tap into. And the other piece of housekeeping is that, so yesterday we went a little long, and that's probably why I'm a little extra tired today. But I'm not going to do a meditation at the end of our session today, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Well, one, that was the guidance that I received, and I confirmed it, with in the ways that I confirm the guidance that I get spiritually, and part of the reason for that is because we're talking about something that's so very sacred. I don't want anyone to confuse my meditations or my approach to just opening up and receiving to mistake that for the spiritual practice of the Akom people. This is an entire spiritual tradition that many of us are connected to ancestrally. And it's likely that at some point we got some ancestors that were from that region that is now known as Ghana. And it is an entire spiritual system, an entire spiritual technology. And if it's something that you're called to learn more about, to connect with in any way, going to the priestesses and priests who actually are trained, initiated, and hold the energy of that is the direction you need to go in. And I want to direct you there. When we get done with the live, I'm going to add some resources, some links to videos and things in the comments so that you can go and actually hear directly from those who are in this tradition, who are steeped in it, who have studied it either for a lifetime, like these two, and or for many years. And Power Dynamics says, I think because of the oppression of Black men, Black women step back to give them a sense of power and dignity. And unfortunately, it leaves us with little because we too are oppressed. I think that's one of the components of what we are experiencing and seeing when we think about, the fact that the Black women's voices have not been heard. But I think it might even be deeper than that as well. When we look at just how much venom there is for Black women throughout, for no reason in some cases. There's something else popping off. And yes, I do think, in a lot of cases we step back to try to uplift them, but not necessarily that is the best strategy to uplift them. Because as you mentioned, we all have been oppressed. But we're going to keep going. And so again, we're not going to do a meditation at the end of this session today, because if it is for you to connect in this way with this spiritual tradition, then finding pathways to directly connect with those who practice it and who can guide you in that is more important, is more in alignment rather than doing meditation. Then we'll get back to doing the meditations at the end of our sessions as we go forward and completing this 28 days and the 7 days of sacred restoration. Okay, let's get into it, because we're not going to be here for an hour today, y'all. Okay, so these leaders, the path of, we want to talk a little bit about their lives and earlier influence, and they're actually connected. They have two different lives. One was, born in Africa, raised whole life there. The other one was born and raised here in the United States. But it turns out that they are connected, that they are distant relatives. And there's more that we'll talk a little bit. No, I'll briefly mention that, but one of the links that I'll share in the comments later will lead you to a presentation shared by someone that is in this Akom tradition that shares more details about how it came about. And I think that's again, I'm handling this with care because it is everything that we've been doing is sacred, but this is directly connected to a spiritual system, and I want to be respectful of it and the people who practice it. All right, so let's get into it. So Nana Akua Oparebea. And I said I was only going to do Nana Akua, but I just felt like I needed to say the whole thing that time. She was born in 1900 in Larteh, or Larteh, in a region that was then occupied by the British, which they called the Gold Coast. And some people still do because there were obviously just rich gold fields, which you could just imagine how the colonizers were salivating over that. So she was born under British colonization in that region that is now known as Ghana, because Ghana won its independence. And she was raised in a family that had deep spiritual roots. For generations, they had been custodians of a particular deities. And I'm not going to name the deities again, being out of respect. It's not that it's hidden, but I don't feel like it's for me to start talking about the deities of the spiritual tradition, and I'm not trained in it or fully educated in it, although I am very curious, which is probably why their names ended up on my list. But from a very age, she was immersed in these traditional rituals and the oral histories, because that's how we pass things down in our culture throughout, West Africa, these oral traditions. And she was trained in responsibilities of spiritual leadership. And her aunt was an esteemed priestess of the shrine that they were custodians of in this region of what is now Ghana. And at an early age, she had these profound spiritual episodes. And initially, there was concern, or at least, from the outside looking in, there was concern. But I'm sure her mama and her family knew exactly what was going on. And throughout all of that, at an early age, she was identified of having this divine calling, the spiritual calling, to serve and to be again to take over as custodian for the shrine and the work that her family had been doing for generations. And it confirmed that she was chosen for this work. And there were many signs about her spiritual path that she was destined for. She had a rigorous apprenticeship under her aunt, who was again this esteemed priestess, to master Akan spiritual practices and rituals. The training encompassed, a lot of different aspects of what that spiritual technology does, including healing ceremonies. And she was educated and practiced the importance of ancestral veneration. That is the cornerstone, that is the foundation of Akan spirituality. A spirituality of Akan spirituality is ancestral veneration and connecting with ancestors and receiving guidance from ancestors. So she was trained again from early age by her aunt in mastering these things and these aspects of their family's spiritual traditions. And because of this British colonization, she saw the suppression or the attempt to suppress indigenous spiritual practices. As they came in, they being the British, came in claiming areas, claiming land, claiming the riches of the land, the gold that was there, claiming all of that wealth. They were also imposing their own religious beliefs on the people there and starting to suppress and demonize all of the indigenous spiritual practice that had sustained these people, our people, for generations. So she witnessed that, but at the same time, her family and the work that she did held on to the rituals, the beliefs, the traditions that were the Akan spiritual practice. As we went further, then in 1957, alongside at the same time that Ghana won its independence and what was the Gold Coast as a colony of Britain became Ghana, an independent nation. She also ascended to be the chief priestess of this important shrine in that area. So as Ghana gained its independence and was able to move away from the British, she rose in position to solidify and to really stabilize the spiritual traditions that was there as well. And you know how things go. There is no accident. There is no coincidence. These things happening together was meaningful. And her leadership really symbolized this resurgence of cultural pride and spiritual autonomy in this post-colonial era. So as Ghana rose forward and recreated itself, because now it was unified, it had a name that had dated back to another empire centuries before. So that name Ghana was not a new name. Reclaiming its independence alongside this rich spiritual tradition was meant all to happen together. I'm sure someone had prophesized that as well. And so we give thanks for Nana Akua. We'll talk more about how her work found its way here in the Americas. Now, Nana Yao Opare Dinizulu the first. I said, oh, I just needed to say his whole name. So he was born Augustus Edwards in 1930 in Harlem, New York. And he was born during the Cultural Renaissance, during the Harlem Renaissance, when there was this surge of African American artistic and intellectual activity. Yesterday, we talked about Dr. Frantz Fanon and his influence by or from the Negritude movement in Martinique and in Paris and in France and all of the French-speaking colonies, which was similar to this Harlem Renaissance. So it seems like there's this point where we start to reach for to reclaim who we are and have pride in who we are. So that's what he was born in and what he grew up in, with that intellectual activity and many who were disconnected seeking to reconnect their African ancestral roots. Now, he was definitely influenced by all of the cultural expressions around him and what he was seeing, and eventually he founded a cultural association called the Ghanas. Again, keeping in mind Ghana, the current nation, independent nation, didn't exist yet, but the Ghana or the Ghana Empire was an empire that existed several hundred years before the British came into Africa. But the whole point, as I'm trying to say, is the name Ghana had a meaning, although it wasn't with the current country that we know as Ghana. So he established this cultural association and really focused on educating members about African dance and music and cultural practices, and tried to foster a sense of identity and community. And this was to lay the groundwork for deeper explorations of his African spirituality and heritage. And then some of the things that he did, he would bring together people. He had the dance company, he had the music and the drumming, and would put on performances and with this cultural association. And he would gather up people to charter trips, planes, taking people to Africa, taking people to what is now known as Ghana. And then there was one particular trip that he took to Ghana in 1965. It was one of the trips that he took with his dance company, and it was a transformative journey. And it was during that trip that he ended up in Larteh, or Larteh, if I'm saying it correctly, where Nana Akua was from, where she was. And through a number of different spiritual processes, again, I'm not going to get into the sacred, not really secrets, because it's out there for us to know, but I just don't feel like it's for me to get into educating on that part of the story. But through all of that, it was understood that there's a reason why he was drawn to that area and to Nana Akua, and it's because that is where his ancestry was from. That is where his people were from. He was connected to them in through lineage, and actually connected and related to Nana Akua. Had no idea, was just following the impulse truly of his ancestors calling him back home. And one story that I will tell from or share from the information that that he found, and that you'll find in the link that I'll share in the comments, is that he when the slave trade was happening, when they were kidnapping and taking our people, and bringing them to various locations, there were two priests that were missing. And when the people of the village found that they were missing, they prayed for them. They poured libation for them. They prayed for them to return home because they were powerful. They were important, and you know, they wanted their people back, but they had been taken. And so it turns out that those, or at least one of those priests, was Nana Yao, Dinizulu's ancestor. So him coming back was that those prayers being answered. It wasn't in the form of the priest that had been taken and enslaved, but in the form of his descendant returning home. And so it was a reconnection for both the people there and for Nana Dinizulu as well. Again, you'll see and hear more about that in the link that I'll share later. And again, it was during that visit that he was initiated. He received his full title, Nana Yao Opare Dinizulu the First. And that was the start of his mission to really introduce the Akan spiritual practice here in the U.S. He established a shrine, a temple, the first Akan shrine and temple in America in 1967 when he returned. Um, and it served as a spiritual haven for African Americans who wanted to understand more and wanted to reconnect with their ancestral roots. They offer teachings and the rituals and the ceremonies and the practices to really help ground the community in ancestral wisdom, to help us to understand an aspect of who we were that we had no access to prior to this. Now, mind you, Akan as a spiritual tradition or a spiritual practice is one of many that our ancestors practiced along the west coast of Africa. um, So I want to point that out, in that, you know, there may be others that you will hear about or have learned about or even practice. This is just one that maybe it doesn't quite have the popularity as some of the other ones that are much more visible now in today's time. So I just wanted to mention that this isn't the only one, but this is a significant one that at least I was being called to honor and acknowledge and share information on. Okay, and then obviously, you know, he was initiated and trained by Nana Akua. And as he's establishing these shrine and temple and doing this work in the US, he invited Nana Akua to come to the United States to further this information, to further this reconnection. Yeah, obviously not permanently, but inviting her here. And that was a historic event that we'll talk about a little bit more. But the fact that it symbolized this idea of spiritual reparations, bringing, it was the first time someone of her stature, an esteemed priest and chief priestess of her stature, crossed the Atlantic by choice, because there were esteemed priests and priestesses that crossed the Atlantic by force during the slave trade. So her coming of her own volition to help us, to help bridge that gap, to share the cultural context that had been lost from us. That was an historic, a big event. That was an important event. And that's gives you an idea of how spirit can work in bringing people, these two people together who never knew each other, would have had no opportunity to know each other, to come to find out that they had a linkage in terms of their ancestors, and had important work to do to link all of us, to give all of us access to information, concepts, culture as a part of our restoration. So we give thanks to both of them, and the spirits and the energies, and, you know, to the practices that they both have shared with all of us. So let's keep it moving. So what are some of the things that they did to help us bridge, the gaps? So Nana Akua, she helped establish this transatlantic spiritual network. again, collaborating with Nana Dinizulu, the first, to create this transatlantic network. And that partnership helped facilitate exchange of spiritual knowledge and practices between Ghana and the African diaspora, helping us to bring things together, helping us to bring it back in, if you will. And she provided and helped with training and initiating priests and priestesses. A lot of the Akan houses that exist now are either led by priests that were initiated and trained by Dinizulu and Akua, or descended from them, meaning, the people that they trained and initiated more. So essentially, the Akom tradition here in the United States, we can consider Nana Akua the mother of them, because she is who crossed the oceans to help us and to train and to share the knowledge. And then she helped adapt the spiritual practices of the Akan for the diaspora. We have a different culture. We were not born and raised on the continent. We are in a very different environment. We don't have access to the same things. We don't have the exact same worldview. We don't have the same cultural customs here as African Americans. And so she helped to bridge that gap so that we can reclaim parts of our culture, but help us contextualize it in what was actually happening now and who we actually were. And she looked at, there's also a piece of the story where not story, but a piece of this where, there's certain, if you think about in Christianity, there's like, or in Catholicism, there's certain angels that have different duties and different roles. And it's a similar thing in these African spiritual traditions where there's a supreme God, and then there's lesser gods or angels or patron saints, however words we want to use for it, that actually have specific roles that carry out God's work. And she looked and understood the trauma that we'd been through and started incorporating other energies and deities, these lesser deities, these quote unquote angels. I'm just trying to make the terminology make more sense, that we would need in terms of our healing. So that was part of how she adapted the spiritual practices for us as well. And then educational initiatives where helping to document and emphasize the importance of preserving the spiritual knowledge by documenting it and educating others on it. And she encouraged that we record oral histories and rituals and teachings so that it would be left to transmit to someone else in future generations. So this whole concept of things being an oral tradition, that was part of the adaption, right? It was taking it forward to say, okay, we got to have things written. We have to have things, we have technologies now. I mean, and this is not even, our current time periods in 2025, but just being able to have video recordings or audio recordings so that we can preserve this knowledge. It was part of what she advocated for and did. And again, creating these cultural centers here in the US, and I think there's one in Canada as well, to help to support the education as a way to facilitate the documentation and the teaching that was happening. And then she helped provide these pathways to healing for us, emphasizing ancestral veneration and how that could help us heal this deep-seated trauma of slavery, colonialism, and cultural dislocation. Like, we've been separated from the essence of who we were as a people, and there's pieces of that now. We have blended and have a different cultural context now, but there's aspects of our cultures and our practices that came from the continent, that came from our time and our community way of looking at community from the continent, and that were either stripped away or just have been severely reduced. And I say that the severely reduced because some things that are Black culture, you can trace it absolutely back to African culture. So it didn't fully go away. It's just morphed, but understanding where things come from and why we do some of the things we do and expanding it is part of the restoration process. And she helped African descendants reconnect with their ancestral spiritual lineage. That's a part of the process as well, and that's part of what she helped with Nana Dinizulu to help him to reconnect with his ancestral lineage as well. And this framework on bringing that ancestral loss to a close and making sure it's not a permanent rupture, this ripping away of us, of the ancestors that were actually taken, ripping them away from the motherland created a divide, created a fissure that we can bring back together. And that's part of the work that she helped to do. And we give thanks for that. And then there's Nana Dinizulu, who obviously was a huge part of the work here in the U.S., who actually, was the bridge that brought Nana Akua here and the Akom spiritual tradition here. I know Bosun, I know how to say that part. I could probably work through the second word as well. Dezima Wadizi. And if that is incorrect, my deepest, sincerest apologies, because I don't want to disrespect anybody's language. But we talked about yesterday how this 50-plus-year-old mouth struggles sometimes. But the point is, that is the name of the shrine, the first shrine that he founded, Akan shrine that he founded here in the U.S. And he created it as a sanctuary for spiritual reconnection. Um, it was a place where African Americans in New York could connect with Akan rituals and ceremonies and really start to understand the cosmology. And that's the word that, and the reason, the cosmology is the reason why I'm not going too deep with it, because I have not studied the cosmology, so I can't speak to it with the clarity that it deserves. Maybe I need to go to New York and visit this place. So he again offered the training and the ancestral veneration, libation ceremonies, sacred drumming, because if you recall, it was the drumming and the cultural performances that brought him in, that connected him into his African spiritual roots. And it was traveling with his dance company and also taking people who wanted to experience Africa, which was pretty radical at the time. A lot of folks do it now, but in the 60s, going to Africa, that was radical. And would take a whole plane full of people. But connecting them and connecting us and connecting him with his spiritual roots really happened through the music and the drumming and the dance. And so he didn't, he continued to do that, does continue to be a piece of it. And then again, though, those culturals, and I've kind of alluded to that as a moment ago, those chartered trips from the US to Ghana, which gave folks in the community immersive experiences. They could actually touch ground, actually be there in the environment and on the soil in Africa, again, at a time when that wasn't that common. And they included, ritual ceremonies, sometimes guided spiritual instruction or community building, or just to experience the ancestral land as something alive now and not a distant memory. And it helped create these lasting relationships across the diaspora from the US and then back to the motherland there in Ghana. And he facilitated training and initiation. So the training and initiation. So when he invited, and I'll go ahead and bring the other one because that's a piece of it. When he invited Nana Akua Opare, one of the things that they did was created this cultural center, and that was. And it still exists today in a different form, because I think his son is taking it over now, and they still do some of that work. But the training and initiation and creating these temples and shrines, both in New York and in and around Washington, D.C. There may be some other locations. I know there's one in Canada. That was a huge entry point, a huge benefit and part of the healing process of us reclaiming who we are. And it became this cultural center became an intergenerational hub for education. It was about teaching the youth about their ancestral roots and heritage, as well as training adults and putting them on the path or helping them along their path to of spirituality, and if priesthood was something that was in on their path, or just in general connecting with their ancestral roots. And so there were a few key aspects of connecting to or reconnecting with our ancestors to bring about the healing. It's the reclaiming our ancestral memory. They both together, they both really emphasize the idea that ancestral memory resides in the body and can be accessed. This is why ritual, dance, and drumming are so important and are an integral part of the healing process and an integral part of the spiritual tradition. And they really saw that this cultural practice not only restores our cultural identity, but also our mental and emotional well-being. And then they looked at spiritual sovereignty as resistance. We talked about resistance last week, but also reclaiming your own culture, your own spiritual practices in whatever way that that makes sense for you. They help to really inform and frame ancestral reconnection as a part of that. And by reclaiming indigenous spiritual framework, they empowered us in the diaspora to define what healing and identity and belonging meant to us on our own terms. Because now we had a clearer understanding, or we can have a clearer understanding of what's possible, of what we've come from, of what is indigenous to us. And now we can, with consciousness, I'm gonna just say remix all of the different pieces of it, remix all of um, the pieces that were initially lost in the transatlantic slave trade, as well as the pieces that we created since we've been here. And the other piece, I think, that combines both of their work and their approaches and the legacy they leave for us is the building the transatlantic spiritual lineage and rebuilding it, reestablishing broken spiritual lineages that would have never been broken were it not for the slave trade, by reconnecting people, whether it's again initiation, ceremony, community rituals, even things like naming ceremonies or weddings or funeral rites. Really looking at how did our people lay our people to rest when they passed away in a way that is respectful of them. We know many of us, and we've talked about a little bit of it, died horrible deaths and did not, bodies, spirits did not receive the care and elevation that in our traditions that we would normally do for someone who passed away. Those are important aspects of our culture that had been lost. And Nana Akua and Nana Dinizulu are two that helped to bring it back from that particular tradition. And the whole process is not only about individual healing, but about communal healing and communal resilience. And part of what we need to look at and understand um, as we're on this restoration journey. And I think what has been said all these we're almost at the 4 week, we're heading towards a full 4 weeks now, but what has been reiterated through the ancestral wisdom from everyone we have elevated and honored is this need to do your individual work as well as the collective and community work. It has to be both. What we've experienced it as a collective, and we need to heal as a collective, but we each individually have a part to play in that, and that we need to heal ourselves so that as we work with the collective to heal, we're doing so from a place of clarity, from a place of light, and not bringing your bullshit into the collective. Work on your stuff and then bring to the collective so we can all work on it because we're building on each other. So let's talk about what the wisdom that they left for us. And I took a slightly different approach with this because, again, it is a very intricate process and an intricate understanding, looking at and honoring the spiritual tradition, the Akom spiritual tradition. And so, and also because they were connected, and clearly there was a divine purpose for the two of them two different continents to bring it together. Even just thinking about that, them coming together across continents, there was no way that that would have, he wouldn't have been walking down the street in Harlem and ran into her. He wouldn't have just happened to be in Africa and ran into her. These were things that just had to come together. Ancestors be doing the work. When it's time for something to happen, be woke, be aware, keep your eyes open, because they're sending messages and sending people on your path to help you do what you came here to do. And that's what happened with the two of them. They were here for a purpose, and their purposes were intertwined. And he had to be obedient to take himself to Ghana in order to meet her, in order to get this next part of his journey underway. And so the wisdom and lessons from them combined is all about ancestral connection as a path to healing this intergenerational trauma that we in the diaspora have received, have endured. And I focus on that because that's what we're talking about is Black History Month, but we also know that our liberation is tied to global liberation. We know that our enslavement is tied to colonization that's still happening. We know it's a global, transatlantic, across the world fight for liberation. Every ancestor that we've talked about and honored and uplifted these last few weeks, that's part of the wisdom that we have to understand. We are part of a global effort. We're part of a global resistance. And the ancestral reconnection is no different. It's a part of that as well. Our ancestral reconnection with those, and I bring this part into it from my ancestors, reconnecting with those on this land, these last 500 years of ancestors. Do the due diligence to try to understand and know who your peoples were, the great, 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 great grandmamas and granddaddies that toiled here and built here, as well as your African lineage, and bringing that forward. And again, remixing, but you can't remix it if you don't understand it. You can't remix it and bring it forward if you separate yourself from it and demonize it the way you've been taught as an oppressed person by our oppressors, by the colonizers. So this idea of ancestral connection is at the core of the wisdom that Nana Akua and Nana Dinizulu leave for us. And part of that includes creating these pathways for our healing. Now, what does that mean? That means that we can ensure that our cultural reconnection practices are accessible, that connecting with what was or connecting with cultures that seem foreign to us now because we've been so separated from it. How do we bring it together? That can mean looking at educating people on the Akan spiritual pantheon and the healing deities and hearing the stories about what that has done. And it could mean bringing people together and taking trips to Ghana, taking trips to Benin, taking trips to other West African countries. I'll say Nigeria. It's not easy to travel to Nigeria, but I'll say Nigeria. But the point is to bring communities together to go and actually experience it, to educate. We can use the digital technologies, even, this video educating us on who people were. So now that you know these names, you can go and dig deeper and do your own exploration and find living human beings who can share more information. And again, I'm going to put some links in the comments later to videos here on YouTube where you can, one is an interview interspersed with drumming performances, and the interview is of um, Nana Dinizulu. So you can actually hear his voice and hear some of the things he said and hear the drumming performances that his group did. And another one is a video talking about how this all came to be and giving more details about the process of how Nana Akua and Nana Dinizulu came to meet and the prophecies that were spoken around both of them. So I'll put those again in the comments after we get through this. But creating those pathways to learn and to be open to what our culture was is an important part of the restoration. That's part of the ancestral connection. And then we can look at those that, bridging the cultural disconnection. We can, a lot of the healers, a lot of the priests that were, as I mentioned, initiated and trained in that order. Actually, the way they phrased it is initiated, trained, and graduated. So they were very clear you wasn't doing things until you actually learned some things. And so part of the things that they have done is created these community shrines and community houses where you can go and learn. And that's part of bridging the disconnection, just learning, just being in the space. And by learning, it could, the drumming, the dance, start there. That's a critical part of it, and it's an easy way to connect. All of that has a role in reawakening ancestral memory because that's what we're talking about. The ancestors are here. The ancestors are within you. They live in your DNA. They live in your body. But parts of you and parts of them, by default, because parts of you have been dormant, has not heard their ancient rhythms, has not heard that or felt that vibration of the drums drumming very specific rhythms that meant a thing to our ancestors. To feel that vibration in your own body, and the vibration is important because we're mostly water, and water will vibrate and create a situation, a positive one. To feel that can reawaken and strengthen our connection to our ancestors within ourselves that can help us to heal and help them to heal. So things you can do is, hosting or joining or being a part of drumming circles, learning dance movements from these different traditions. And again, Akom isn't the only one. There's many different pathways through the arts where we can reconnect with this spiritual practice. And all of it will help release trauma. And we can again reclaim this part of our spiritual practice, the indigenous part of the spiritual practice. And this is about learning. This is about having an understanding. Like I was trying to compare and bring some frame of reference to the Akan um, cosmology, the pantheon of deities, and comparing that to the pantheon of Catholic saints and angels as best I could. But the idea is that if you go and embark upon the education yourself, and no one is saying to transform and to change your spiritual practices or, to go fully all in, but you can learn and open up because you don't know what that would lead to. You don't know what ancestor is living within you that is connected to you, that has been walking with you, that needs that upliftment, that needs that remembrance, that needs that energy in a positive way. And so that's a part of, again, reclaiming that indigenous spirituality. I know people who practice their African spirituality and still go to church. In fact, I know, and they're not an Akom priest, they're an Ifa priest, a Babalao, but he's also a pastor. So he still is a spiritual leader in both his Christian tradition and his African spiritual tradition. He has priesthood in both traditions, and he blends them because he is an African American who claims his African heritage and his African indigenous spiritual system. So there is no rules on how to move forward in this, but the main objective or the main component of it is to open yourself to learning about it and to undoing the the damage that has been done in terms of separating us and making it seem uncivilized or uncouth or evil in some way. Reclaiming who we are and therefore reclaiming and connecting our ancestors or reconnecting with our ancestors. But at the end of the day, all of it is about restoring these ancestral relationships. When those people, when those ancestors that we are connected to were taken and put on those ships and tortured, That was a ripping for a people who lived our lives, whose very way of looking at the world was based on community, was based on family. That was a ripping. In addition to the entire inhumanity, the inhumane conditions, the very idea of enslaving a people, all of the things that were done to us, which were very clear, we've talked about, we've seen it. I'm separating this idea of being, or expanding this idea of being separated from our families, from our communities, as its own ripping, because it was very damaging. It was part of who we were that was taken away. So restoring that is a key part of restoring us, is a key part of becoming whole again. And we can't, sometimes we're able to do the DNA and actually go back and find the actual people who are your long lost cousins. But more important than that is restoring that ancestral connection spiritually, energetically. And that requires restoring those ancestral relationships. It may require ancestral veneration. It may require doing stuff like we're doing with this over the 28 days, especially that first week of ancestral lineage, of going deep with your people, the ones connected to you, the community ancestors as well, because they are as important, or are important, but reconnecting with your bloodline. And I've said this before, if you are adopted or were raised in the foster system, you can still connect with your bloodline if you can get through and heal from whatever may be present from being from that level of separation, because now you have a more recent real level of separation that's happened. And I'm not a therapist and don't claim to give mental health advice, but I just know, looking from an ancestral perspective, even if you are adopted, even if you went through foster system, you have some ancestors who have been watching out for you, loving you, protecting you, guiding you as best they could. And you can still reach for them to restore that relationship. So when we think about that, we can come together and do ancestral healing circles or ancestral remembrance circles. Communities can come together, or community members can come together and share their family histories, share their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so we can learn from each other. We can share what we've learned about different African spiritual systems and how that compares or contrasts or complements what we know about the Black church, because that's another part of our spiritual system. As I mentioned before, we can take these trips together in groups to the continent, and actually experience it together, but actually experience the places and spaces, or at least the land that our ancestors there had been on and lived and worked. Heck, you can take a pilgrimage to wherever you're from in the South, in the United States, in the Southern United States, and connect with that land, because trust and believe your ancestors' blood, sweat, tears, and bones are in that land. Go to the areas, do the research, and come, and people can come together to do that. So you're not out there in, some fields in the middle of Mississippi by yourself. Definitely not now. But that's another aspect of how we can reconnect and restore these ancestral relationships. There's so many different pathways, and we give thanks to Nana Akua and Nana Dinizulu for for bridging that gap, for bringing us together and helping us to reclaim and restore those relationships, and understanding that um, how we will restore ourselves is going to be multifaceted. We talked about the mental piece yesterday, and this is the spiritual piece. And this might be one of the most difficult pieces because we're a deeply spiritual people. We just are. It is part of who we are. Can't get away from it. But we've also been very much taught to fear things as well. So somehow learning and growing through that, you can just look at it as an educational process. But again, the healing, it has to center ancestral connection is the key takeaway. And reclaiming our spirituality is also political resistance because if, again, going back to British colonization and in an area that was never all one thing, but all they saw was the gold, so it all became the Gold Coast, that is now Ghana. When they came in to take over the resources, and when I say came in, brutally invasion, we use that word colonizing. It's an invasion. It is a military action invasion of a people that still happens today. When they came in and invaded, they also brought their religion with them and suppressed what was there. So as we look at liberation from the colonizers, from enslavement, we also have to think about and consider our spiritual liberation as well. What was taken from us that would have never went away had it not been for imperialism, had it not been for racialized capitalism. It's a part of the restoration. And healing is collective and individual. You got work to do on your own shit, and we got work to do as a people. Now, we also have that concept that Mama Harriet Tubman taught us. Everybody ain't trying to get to freedom. Everybody does skin folk ain't kinfolk. Everybody that look like us ain't trying to get to the same place as some of us. So we need to be clear about that. Collective, but it doesn't mean every single last one of us. Some people gonna get left. What they fighting for ain't even in the right direction. Some people are so fragmented that they feel that their proximity to whiteness, even though they can be blacker than the black, whiteness at this point is beyond the lack of melanin. It is a mental construct and way of thinking about the world and each other. Some folks are so attached to that, they ain't letting it go. Some people are so fearful, like the ones who told about the uprisings that Prosser and Vesey were planning. Those who told couldn't let go of the current situation. The fear of the unknown helped them to hold on to where they were. So my point is, everybody, the collective, yes, is part of our healing, but everybody ain't interested in being in the collective and in healing. So you need to balance that. Use your intuition, Octavia Butler, and your critical thinking. Your critical thinking and intuition, I'm going to say that's Zora Neale Hurston and Octavia Butler. And the idea that this cultural identity is critical for our resistance and our resilience. Who we are as a people is unmatched. It's emulated, it's imitated all over the planet. And there's a foundation that comes from that. There's a foundation that is connected to our ancestors that makes it unique. So as it splinters off in different parts of the diaspora and moves through time to what we call Black culture, at the root is coming from who we were and our ancestral connections. And we give thanks. We give thanks to Nana Akua Oparebea and Nana Yao Opare Dinizulu the first for their work in helping us bridge and helping us reclaim and helping us restore through the Akom spiritual traditions of West Africa. Whew, take a deep breath. I hope that was insightful for you and opened you up to thinking about some things and exploring some things and looking at different components of your own healing process, your own restoration process. As I mentioned, I will put some, oh, Ia, you're here. Hello, Ia Tyra. Check out her YouTube. You want to get, I'm going to just direct people to you for that meditation that I'm not going to do today. I give you thanks, Ia, for being here. Um, so today, I'm going to close out and I'm not going to do a meditation today. I've done that. I did one yesterday and I'll do a meditation at the end of of the rest of them this week. But today, because we're talking about a spiritual tradition that has its own technology, that has its own process and protocol, I don't want to be disrespectful of that and have anyone that listens or watches this to think the meditation that I offer is an Akom meditation or is in any way something endorsed or created or that I've been taught by Akom elders. This is about your own personal reconnection. Your ancestors may not one single drop of blood from this region of Africa may be in your body, and therefore your ancestors might be like, no, we good. Or there may be one drop of blood in your body, and that one drop, that one ancestor may have been a chief priestess of a shrine that was kidnapped and sold into slavery, who has been clamoring for recognition. And this may be your entry point. You'll know in your body if it's something to go forward. And you have the name of the two individuals who brought the Akom spiritual tradition to the Americas. Dive in on their names and you will find spiritual houses. You will find current modern day priests and priestesses to connect with. Your ancestors will make sure of it. So all you need to do right now, you don't need to follow my guided meditation. You can go outside and take some deep breaths and take a walk in nature and have a conversation with your sacred lineage. And with that, I thank you all for being here. I thank you um, for walking with me through this. And I thank you for your grace. If I had not mentioned that at the beginning, for your grace for me being off camera today. We're doing every other day. Today was an off camera day. And this, in terms of preserving my energy and going off camera when I need to, that is something that I learned from Tyra Omalade. Sometimes you just gotta like turn that camera off and let the energy stay here where it is. And that has been helpful for me to get through these days. It has been 23 days of going live every single day, and I'm thankful for it. I walked into this just being obedient to what my ancestors guided me to do, not knowing what it was going to be exactly, except for the overarching framework of how we were going to move each week. And then as we went through it, who and what ancestors we were going to work with. So it's been a transformative experience for me, and we are right towards the end of it and focusing on the healing from all of these full 500 years that we've been through as a people. So still wound up being an hour. I thought it was going to be less, but here we are. So I'm thankful. Yes, turn the camera off. You have a beautiful voice and graphics. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm using all of the things. Because then I'm going to go take a nap and then get back to it. Get ready for tomorrow. So thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you. You know, I was inspired by you and being a part of the programs and your teachings and the goddess, the G Hive, the goddess hive, and doing this work. Because Black women, let me tell you, we are incredible. We hold each other up. We hold the race up. If race was a word, if race wasn't a construct, we hold our people up. I'll say that. And I learned a lot of that and was able to grow and expand in that through Tyra's work. So I thank you. And thank you, Power Dynamics for Life, Dr. Belizaire, been riding with me, I think almost every day of this 28 days, these 23 days we have in so far. And I thank you for that. That's our political scientist, PhD in political science. so has come in with the clarifications on things so that we can understand where we've been and where we're going and the threats that we actually are facing now. Definitely check out her channel to learn more. I'm nudging her to put out some more content now and coming up here because our people need to understand politically and constitutionally what is happening. And we got to put it in plain terms and not in the old white man English terms that makes it confusing to understand. So Dr. Belazaire going to help us with that. So, and with that, I give you thanks. I thank you. I thank your ancestors. I thank my ancestors. And I thank the Creator by whatever name you call her, him, them, because we need all the components, but we know we came out of a cosmic birther. And I give thanks to that first woman, that original woman on the planet that gave birth to humanity. I give thanks to her. And with that, as always, until next time, take good care of you.